So, like I said, like when the Axis, I think it was the Axis, right? That was the Germans, right? Like the Axis storm
Yeah.
in through
Yeah.
Britain in the middle of the night in 19 something. Woj and Shams dropped the bomb of the night, telling us of a package that the Nets ultimately said no to of Jalen Brown. Um, a pick. I'm
And
trying to
Derek
remember what
White.
was the last
And
pick.
Derek
And
White.
Derek White. And the Nets said no to that for exchange of Kevin Durant.
Mhm.
Brian, first, what do you think about that first proposal? I'm sure they're going to go back on the drawing board, but what do you think about that first proposal?
I think it's a pretty solid proposal. I so one, if you just think about like what the Nets can generally get, they really it feels like it's not as much as that as you would think, or at least people are willing to give up, and it's really not as much as you would think. Of like all these younger teams with new stars like Scotty Barnes, Evan Mobley. Seems like those teams do not want to give up those guys. And then you see the team that just went to the NBA Finals trying to give up their best performer in that entire finals. Even though we've talked about it on here of even though Jalen Brown performed the best, we still think that Jason Tatum is probably the better player to go forward. But Jalen, that doesn't mean Jalen Brown's any slouch or anything like that. So it's kind of cool and surprising to see them still throwing his name around in all these trades. The other stuff around him is pretty weak in my opinion. Of like Derek White, whatever the picks were, I don't think it was officially said, but like Celtics picks are not going to be very much, especially with Kevin Durant on the team. So unless it's like a 2028 pick, when you have Jason Tatum, being gonna like 31 or whatever, like in good shape, there's not really much hope there. Um, so that's kind of like my first thoughts. I'm very intrigued by your thoughts, Jeff, as our resident Nets expert. What do you think about this?
You forgot Miami Heat as
Oh yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah. Miami Heat,
Heat
Miami
as
Heat.
well, you know. It's all contingent. It's all contingent to
Yeah.
the decision that the Nets make, right? So first, um, first like impact, or I guess first thought. I mean, is the best way to put it that I had when I heard this trade is like honestly, probably the best you're gonna get. No, it's probably the best you're gonna get when
Probably.
you have the likes of Mikal Bridges being the center of your trade. And it's no shade to him. Think about how many times on the pod we talked greatly about him.
Yeah.
He's a great player. But do you move Earth and Sea, for Cal Bridges? Like that's what Kevin Durant is. You don't get a second chance on a guy like that. They only make a couple of those every century, right? Or every decade, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to move him for something that seems like, it's sad to say it like this, but pedestrian. Because like when it all comes down to it, and I feel like this is propelling thought throughout the league, is picks are nice, right? Um, but they are really contingent on thought,
Yeah.
right? Like it's not. We don't know what that pick's going to turn out to be,
It's a lottery
especially
ticket.
when we're thinking exactly when we're thinking 5 years down the road. Like it's hard to say like there's going to be the best prospect in that draft at that time that will have or be able to replicate the same type of skill as Kevin Durant, right? So I'm still of the mindset that you don't move a guy like that, right? But if Kevin Durant makes it so hard for him not to be here, or is going to make it hard for you to even want him to be here, then you have to acquiesce to some degree. And by far, with all of the picks, I mean, with all of the trade partners that we've seen, this is probably the best of what you're getting out of the situation. Now, I am not remiss to think about Jalen Brown's side of it. He literally tweeted
Yeah.
SMH earlier today. And I know he was a little upset already hearing his name being thrown into trade proposals earlier in the year and saying, like, like I'm a talented player. I'm a key part of this team and people want to ship me as quick as possible. It's kind of sad on his part, but it's like they say all the time now, it's a part of the business, that something like this could happen. You can't be too personal about it. You can't make it too personal. But hey, I think that this is honestly a place where he gets a fresh start, a fresh chance of being a contender, and that's what I'm not missing out on the thought process to. Is let's say, and it's going to come up at in other topics as well, but let's say, as we've been seeing for the last couple of years now, the Lakers do the wrong thing, right? And Kyrie going to the Lakers is almost not as certain or is not as possible to happen, right? So you have a team now of Jalen, you have a team of Ben Simmons heading it, right? We don't know what Ben Simmons looks like. It's been over a year, so we can't really even understand if he's going to be who we think he is, right? But you're bringing in potentially, and the reason why that trade was held up apparently is the Nets want to get back Marcus Smart. There's been for years now, the Nets have thought of Marcus Smart as a guy that they want on their team. There's a couple of years back, you can look back when the Nets were complete dookie, and Sean Marks was met up with like Marcus Smart during a summer league game, and like there was a feeling that this has always been someone he's interested in, and I think that that goes back to him being a part of the Spurs organization. Marcus Smart being in the Texas area, so he's probably hearing rumblings of him ever since he was in high school, about how good this guy is, and it's just been he's defensive player of the year for a reason, even though I wouldn't have gave it to him, but he's defensive player of the year for a reason, right? So if you're able to pull two of those guys as centerpieces of your trade, then let's say, and this is a trade that I'm seeing everywhere, or not everywhere, but an interesting one that is being thrown around is a trade around the Miami Heat for Kyrie Irving and getting someone like a Max Strus in that trade, a Duncan Robinson in that trade, getting a Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry, I believe, is on an expiring contract.
Mhm.
That gives the Nets more flexibility for next year. You're looking at a team that still could compete, not contend, but can compete in the East, and they're not as far off as you would think. And then now on the flip side of it, this just propels Celtics into contention beyond just going to the finals to winning the finals. It kind of puts the heat on them as well, but it is a good situation for them to have. Team that is based around all of um, its historical backing of winning championships. They want to have a situation where they're once again thought of as, hey, we're contenders. We're always going to be in that conversation. We'll be the ones that'll be putting up the banner at some point. So it seems like that is the closest we'll get to a win-win in a situation than any other. Miami doesn't have the assets. The Suns doesn't have the assets. Toronto has the assets. They don't want to give the assets. Boston's the only one that has the assets and actually is willing to give up a piece which in this NBA, in this version of the NBA now, it's kind of crazy to ask for an asset back in a trade just because a star wants to leave.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's really funny to see like the little things that's stopping the trades, or not even little things, but like you said, all right, so Kevin Durant, superstar, one of the best players in the NBA. And you're saying 1A, 1B, 2, whatever. No one has them lower than 3, I would imagine. Um, People is like, all right, you don't want to give up Scotty Barnes, you want to give Evan Mobley. Like, I'm actually kind of on those camps, mainly just because I'm very high on these younger guys. But it is like when you're getting that Kevin Durant, you do have to give something up. And it is crazy that, like, I mean, Jalen Brown is actually something that's like of substance. I would imagine what it kind of feels like when most teams will give up is like, think about the Celtics doing this trade, but without Jalen Brown. And you put in like, so you have Marcus Smart in there, you have Derek White in there, you throw like some of these other just bench guys that you like that are really good on your team that you want to be there, but they don't want to give up because they're like, no, I want to pair up Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Kevin Durant. That's what we want to go. That's essentially what Phoenix was doing with like, we want Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant. That's what we want, so everything else can go. Meanwhile, like you're saying, for Kevin Durant, you don't want Mikal Bridges being the centerpiece of that. So I do really like it. I think it is the closest thing that you would see to a win-win. So I am curious though. So like, we know the Nets declined this without Marcus Smart, and maybe let's say the picks were 2 or 3 picks in there with Jalen Brown, Derek White, and 2 or 3 picks. It would, even that, if you saw that trade was official this morning, would you be upset?
Wouldn't necessarily be upset. I would just feel like, it's time to fleece him back, man. Like it's time, man. Like it's time to get it back. Like
Yeah,
I think you have to exhaust every opportunity, every chance can as much or maximize what you're getting back, right?
for sure.
So I'm not stopping until I hear potentially, and now I'm looking at what you could potentially give or what's on the table. Looking at their roster, I'm either trying to get Jalen. I'm trying to swap out Derek White for Marcus Smart, and honestly, you choose which one you love more, Time Lord, or do you love Grant William more? That one of them has to come because you don't have the draft capital to bring back to the Nets. And you do need the salaries to match. Granted, it does look like Marcus and Jalen together might do it, but you don't have the draft capital, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's no way the Nets say, like, let's say it's a 2 years from now draft pick. That's not going to work. I need someone like a Grant William coming off of a rookie contract that's going to expire next year. That's another guy that I would look at
I think
into.
he just got an
Um,
extension, correct? I believe he got an extension.
okay, well, here we go.
Yeah.
But it does seem like they tried to make the salaries match with a Derek White and Jalen to match Kevin Durant's salary.
Mhm.
But even if, man, I'm willing to even go as far as giving up a guy like who is arguably an easy piece, um, Seth Curry, to get one of their guys back because Seth Curry is gonna be coming off going into an expiring contract,
Mhm.
and he's making around 8 mil a year. Like if you could pull back some salary for that, you give me Jalen Brown, you give me Marcus Smart, you give me I said, if you wanna say peace to Time Lord, or you want to say peace to Grant Williams, say peace to one of them because I'm asking for one of them, and then one pick. I could live with one pick in that situation, but it's not gonna be. It's not gonna be in this decade.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be in this decade. Like, it's definitely gonna be in the next. Like, it's gonna be like 2031, 2032. I'm not looking at anything in 20. Anything that got a two as the third digit. I don't need to see that. Like, I really
the
don't need to see
the
that.
latest teams can trade is 7 years out. So 2029 is the latest he can trade.
Oh man. Oh, I'm gonna make it 2029, and then it has to be like protected so that it rolls
Oh,
into the next year instead of
the
unprotected. Yeah, like that's what I'm gonna
top 28 protected pick.
exactly. It gotta roll something like that, man, because I just don't see when
Yeah.
this team becomes bad. But I'll add another take to this is I was watching or yeah, I was scrolling around, and Nick Wright had a very interesting take on this. And trust me, Nick Wright's not usually one of the guys that I like his takes, but he had a pretty good insight into this. Where and this is a bombshell, Brian. This is definitely get you out of your seat type of talk. He had
Oh.
to say something that would make people go like, "What?" He's like, forget about that. Scratch everything about all of those other pieces. But I think this guy is already on that list, so this might make it even harder.
Mm.
But he's like, just do a trade straight up with Jason Tatum. You don't know if in 3 years Jason Tatum's gonna go like, I don't want to be here anymore. Even with Kevin Durant, or an aging Kevin Durant, that he
Yeah.
doesn't want to be here and he wants to take his talent to LA, like everyone knows him for being so unshy about how much he loves that team, right? So that is a possibility, but I think for the future of the Nets, it makes a lot more sense to just go after Jalen Brown and a package around those role players on their team because, like I said, that looks like a team that could still compete. You still keep Joe Harris. You still are able to, if you don't include Seth Curry, you get to keep Seth Curry. You have some time to develop Claxton further with less pressure of trying to win right now or win it all right now. Also, you get to potentially decide what you're going to do with Kyrie Irving, and that's the biggest contingency after this trade is the aftermath is what do you do with Kyrie? Does Kyrie buy in? Because I know he has great rapport with Jalen Brown, but think about that now. Like, what does that team look like? A Kyrie, Jalen Brown, Ben Simmons. Um, that's a pretty intriguing uh, core to have, but you got to have Kyrie buy into it.
I mean, so yeah, even just thinking about how that team would even look like, I just like the defense. I'm just such a big defense guy, and that's why I've always been so high on Ben Simmons, which hasn't always paid me the best dividends and all that. But man, that team would be a lot of fun. I am curious. Did you get a chance to check out the Windhorse news that or the not even news, but like what he commented on this trade rumor from Shams?
No, no,
So
surprise me.
yeah. So what Windhorse was saying is more of like that he actually doesn't think that these are active talks. That these are more just like he's like I understand this came out today, but this isn't like a fresh thing. Like this has been going on for a while. So this is where it's kind of like into the thoughts of this is a lot of trying to get the price up, trying to do some other stuff like, hey, this is what the Celtics are offering. Look, they're actually giving us a good player here. Let's try to move some people, get some fire under the butts. I'm not sure.
So you telling me Scotty Barnes, huh? That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing Scotty Barnes. That's what I'm hearing in that. But no,
Yeah.
I like this package way more than any other package that
Yeah.
you would get for Kevin Durant. Honestly, will any of them equate to the level of player as Kevin Durant? Obviously, time will tell. But I could answer that really quickly. No,
Yeah.
is what it would be.
I uh I think this whole situation is very interesting, especially with like, so when you have the Kevin Durant saga of the Nets having a super high asking price, people not necessarily wanting to meet it as right now. And it really looks like that this trade, that there really isn't going to be a trade. Kevin Durant's going to be a net at the beginning of the season. But the interesting thing is, like, it feels like the Nets organization actually wants this to act, or Kevin Durant to stay as a net. So maybe like something like this coming out, like I was saying, maybe they're trying to drive the price up. Maybe this is there's reports that they're not in talks with Kevin Durant and all this other stuff. And I think Woj said the other day of that Kevin Durant has not walked back on his trade offers, like, or his trade request. Like, he still wants to get traded. Maybe this is them trying to communicate, like, hey, we're still doing talks out here, so still doing this. Because as we all know, whenever these reports come out, it's all of like, it's all to get people talking. It's all to get, it's, there's always an agenda behind it. So maybe there's something like that. But yeah, it doesn't really feel like to me like the Nets actually want to trade Kevin Durant.
But you know what makes it so compelling that it came out from both individuals
Yes,
is
yes.
that the conversation is happening on both sides, right? Like players are possibly, or agents are hearing the rumblings, and now owners are making it clear that there's rumblings as well. So like they say, there's smoke. If when there's smoke, a fire's not too far, or whatever the
Yeah,
saying
when
is.
the smoke is
You
fire.
get the
Yeah.
gist. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then on the flip side though, of like I was saying, I don't really know if the Nets necessarily want to trade Kevin Durant, but like that's where it's like, hey, if we get this offer, we'll take it. Yeah, if we get an offer that's gonna like blow our socks off, like, all right, we'll take the offer. On the flip side, though, to me, even though I understand some people say otherwise, with the Donovan Mitchell stuff, I don't really. I feel like